Let me welcome you all on behalf of ITP Media Group for today's webinar, Healthcare Radius Fighting the Pandemic series. And today's topic is Digital Healthcare, a Pathway COVID-19. Before I start the session proceedings, I would also like to have certain do's and don'ts of this webinar. I'm sure you all are aware of this, but still I would like to brief some of the many newcomers who are just logging in for the first time with us today. In case you have any issue with the audio, video, or any kind of a communication drop, do send us in the chat box. My backend team will work closely and try to identify the issue and sort it out early. In case you have any questions, there is also a question tab. Please do cast your question in the question tab. And do write if it is for any particular panelist, write his name, and we will try to answer as many as questions. Now, let me just quickly introduce ITP Media Group. ITP Media Group is the largest foreign publishing house headquartered in Dubai. We have been publishing over 100 weekly and monthly B2B magazines. We also do 50 business and consumer events and conferences throughout the year. These are some of our global titles which we publish across our offices in UK, Middle East, and India. ITP India has 7 titles for the B2B markets in India. And today we are talking on the Healthcare Radius magazine, which is organizing this webinar, Digital Healthcare, a Pathway to COVID-19. COVID-19 has redefined the overall technology in the digital healthcare, keeping in mind the current situation and how we as hospital technologists handling this situation in terms of promoting the online consultation, data analytics, remote healthcare, video consultation, and remote patient monitoring. We have made the new foundation for this, which has emphasis on today's healthcare in India, keeping the patient and the doctor confidence in first place. There is focused area which we are going to discuss today in today's webinar, and we have the healthcare experts who are going to answer all these questions today which will arise from this webinar. The recording of the webinar will be shared after the session in next 2 days time for the larger audience to view. Let me introduce our editor, Ms. Rita Datta, who is the editor for Healthcare Radius. She will be taking ahead with the session and introduce our moderator and then the whole proceedings. Over to you, Rita. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjay, so much. A warm welcome to everyone here. I have the privilege of introducing Dr. Nitiraj Gandhi, who is the moderator for today's session. Dr. Nitiraj Gandhi is a Joint Secretary, Board Member of HIMSS India. He has also served as a reviewer for HIMSS Global for past 3 years. He has more than 10 years of experience as a clinician as well as a healthcare management professional across groups like Reliance and Columbia Asia. He currently works with Ernst & Young as a vice president and heads the Digital Healthcare Initiative, AI in Healthcare, use of NLP, and works to automate processes in hospitals. Now, let me introduce the eminent panelists for today. I'll start with Dr. K. Ganapathy, who is the director of Apollo Telemedicine Networking Foundation. He is a past president of the Telemedicine Society of India, former secretary and past president of the Neurological Society of India. He was formerly honorary consultant and advisor in neurosurgery Armed Forces Medical College, Armed Forces Medical Services. In 1990, he became the first in South Asia to get a PhD in neuroimaging. He was the first neurosurgeon from South Asia to be formally trained in stereotactic radiosurgery in 1995 and later in robotic radiosurgery in 2008. He ventured into telehealth in 1998. During the last 45 years, he has presented more than 500 papers in national conferences and 169 in international meetings. Now our next panelist, Dr. Satish Rath. Dr. Satish Prasad Rath is a physician and digital health scientist. He has over 16 years of experience in technologically led healthcare research, health system design and innovation management. He has worked with successful organizations like Xerox Innovation Lab, RC Labs, Intel Labs, Philips Research, and Siemens Healthcare. His major research focus been on AI, computer vision, machine learning, IoT, cognitive behavioral modeling, and healthcare behavioral economics, to name a few. Currently, he is a Chief of Innovation and Research at Astem DM Healthcare. Our next panelist, Devopam Raha. Devopam has more than 22 years of industry experience across different sectors and multiple geographies. He has worked for 7 years in US and last 15 years based in India. He currently serves as Executive Director in KPMG Government and Healthcare Practice. His experience includes large-scale digital transformation projects both in public and private sector. Devopam has deep sectoral technology expertise in healthcare delivery in areas of universal healthcare, HIS, public healthcare, digital technologies for healthcare IT. And Dr. Soumitra Bharadwaj, our last panelist. Dr. Soumitra Bharadwaj is the Group President at Medica Group of Hospitals. He is also the West Bengal State President of AHPI and convener for telemedicine for AHPI. Dr. Bharadwaj has experience of 20 years working with premier institutes like Dabur, Apollo Hospitals, Fortis Healthcare, and Max Healthcare. He has experience of setting up one of its kind tele ICU in Bhagalpur. This ICU has saved over 500 lives over the last 12 months. He is in the process of setting up various tele ICUs at various parts of the country in the coming months. So over to you, Dr. Nitiraj Gandhi. You may start the panel discussion for today.
Thanks a lot, Rita. I hope I'm audible to the audience. Everyone,
yes,
it's an absolute pleasure and privilege to be hosting such an eminent panel. And without much ado, let me just start off with Dr. Ganapathy, who's probably the senior most on the panel. And I would like to just highlight here that, sir, I think this has been one period where telemedicine has gained a lot of focus after COVID. And there's been a considerable surge in teleconsults as well as use of telemedicine in March and April. However, we've also seen a subsequent dip in May. So if you could just elaborate a bit on that, the surge as well as the dip, and how do you, what would be top 2 or 3 things that you would suggest which make telemedicine sustainable for the future?
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi, and I thank Healthcare Radius for arranging this wonderful interactive session. As some of you may know, I got into telemedicine in 1998. I never in my wildest dreams thought that a single strand of RNA would totally radically be the CTO, Chief Transformation Officer for telemedicine, not only in India but globally. First of all, Dr. Gandhi, I'm not very sure whether I would agree with your observation that there has been a dip in May. First of all, India is too big a country. We just don't have reliable statistics. There's so much of variation between region to region, etc. I'm not questioning your observation, but assuming that is true, which as I said, may be true in certain areas, in certain specific parts. On the whole, my impression is there has been an astronomical, radical transformation. In the last 20 years, we have been very aggressive, proactively. I've been playing the role of an evangelist, literally, and trying to convince everybody that remote healthcare is the way to go. Everybody laughed, ridiculed, said, ha, ha, ha. Now, of course, they're not laughing as loudly as they used to before. We had, in the last 5 years, there has been quite a good growth, particularly public-private partnerships. The Apollo Telehealth Services alone does about 8,000 consultations a day, every single day, mostly on public-private partnership. Since March, it took about maybe April, I would say, before the public and the medical community and the administration, the authorities, the regulatory authorities, everybody realized that COVID is here to stay. Contactless medicine is a term which I like to use. I borrowed it from someone else, obviously. I think the future is going to be contactless medicine. And personally, I think it is not a question of pre-COVID, post-COVID, etc. The whole world has been turned upside down. And even if we flatten the curve, even if the acute infection reduces, deaths reduce, etc., the world is never ever going to be the same. Now, regarding your specific question, how do we get the surge back if there is a dip in teleconsultations? A very simple, practical way of doing it is to convince every member of the ecosystem that teleconsultation or remote healthcare is the only way to go, particularly in the present pandemic stage. How do we do this? The existing clinicians, all of us have a database, all of us treat maybe 100,000, 10,000, 100,000 patients if you take hospitals into account. I think a simple way would be for a doctor, each doctor, let us say there are 500,000 doctors in the country, let's take even 50,000 doctors. If 50,000, if I as a doctor tell all my patients, look, these are the advantages, disadvantages of telemedicine on a one-to-one ratio. See, writing about this in the press, organizing webinars like this, creating awareness, etc., is good to an extent. But ultimately, the individual doctor-patient relationship still holds good. In spite of all the development of technology, we still are treated with a lot of respect by our patients. Our patients listen to us. I think the first and foremost thing is the medical doctor needs to be convinced. And I'm sorry to say this, as of January this year, he honestly was not. 99% of the medical community did not like telemedicine. They did not want telemedicine, etc. Now, of course, the numbers are changing. Necessity is the mother of invention. Doctors have realized that WFH or work from home doesn't apply only to TCS and the other IT companies, but applies to every one of us clinicians, etc. as well. Therefore, three methods. One, patients must hear from their own doctors, hey, look, it's far better for you to see me on a screen. And we start off with review patients. There still is some concern. Both doctors and patients are not yet 100% convinced that you can do a good clinical examination on a screen. It could be a smartphone, it could be a 42-inch TV, whatever it is. So the first thing would be review cases. I think it's a crime today to ask a patient to come to see you physically when if you have operated or treated him 3 months ago, 6 months ago, 2 months ago, whatever it is. So we'll start out by telling everybody about review cases. So this is, I personally think that the way to address your question is each doctor takes it upon himself to tell his group of patients, look, telemedicine is the best way to go. Whatever it is, this is only a temporary phenomenon, even assuming it is true. And a major factor which influences the medical community is the notification of telemedicine practice guidelines on March 25th. Until March, there was a fear, there was an uncertainty, excepting a few people who were passionate about telemedicine. The average doctor was still concerned about the legality or otherwise. Now that has been totally sorted out. Every single state medical council has sent notifications talking about the legality of telemedicine, and I think this has gone a long, long way.
Thank you so much, sir, for those insights. I completely agree with you. I think nothing better for a patient than hearing it from the doctors, from the doctor himself. Now, coming back to doctors, I think Dr. Soumitra Bharadwaj is also with us, and he's been, in the battlefield, literally day in and day out, working in a hospital. So, sir, just wanted to understand from you. Generally, there's a perception also in India that people coming to the hospital, when a patient comes to the hospital, that's when it is good for a hospital, and that's how you also give them the appropriate care, and that's how we deliver healthcare traditionally. Now, how has your hospital or generally other hospitals responded to telehealth, surge in this telehealth? Plus, the second question would be more from an organizational perspective, that since work from home has been a necessity and not just a luxury in these days, what has been the scenario in hospitals, and how have you responded to that, especially with the admin staff wanting to work from home?
Thank you. I'm audible, right?
Yes.
First of all, a good afternoon to all the panelists and all the people here. last 2-3 months have been very unusual, and for all people who have been involved in last 2-3 decades in telemedicine, they have been a little bit more of a welcome situation, because a sudden requirement of telemedicine for the very sake of survival of the hospital has come to the forefront. It is also, we saw that those hospitals who were not ready, or they do not have this department or this concept working uh, uh, within their hospital premises, they were really struggling. And this I'm speaking also from my experience at AHPI, where a lot of hospitals were asking, "Okay, now what do we do? How do we engage and start this particular service?" Now, when the lockdown was complete, the business was almost nil, and the requirement of the patients did not cease. Now it is extremely important that we find a method by which we can communicate with the patients. The only possible thing was telemedicine. That was one. Another very important thing which most of the hospitals face who were dealing and engaged in COVID management is the fear of COVID, staff relinquishing their duties. In Calcutta, we had people moving out in large hordes to their home state. This created a big deficiency of staff and support. So the telemedicine not only became relevant to outside the hospital, but it also became relevant to within the hospital, where we could have people behind webcams and with moving cameras within our ICUs, COVID positive wards, HDUs, etc. And the talking was happening at remote level. So when we talk about remote, we talk about many miles, thousands of kilometers at times. But what we saw, that telemedicine was delivering within the hospital. You see, this became very relevant. Lockdowns also prevented doctors from moving out, so that we could have referrals and requirements and visits of doctors from their homes. Now this has become very integral. Of course, the future of telemedicine is where the hospitals take it up from here, and where do they go. There are certain issues with telemedicine right now which we have to understand. One is the lack of training of doctors, lack of awareness of patients, and our real challenge, which I can say from our hospital experience, has been that most of our patients are very old and they are not that tech savvy. So we need to make the experience for the old non-tech savvy patients. The future belongs to any hospital or establishment which comes out with a model where the elderly can be engaged. They will not be able to click buttons. They will not be able to see whether the webcam is working. You will have to work sometimes through their mobiles, which I do not recommend. I think we should stick to desktops as far as possible. So when we design the ecosystem, we talk about tech savvy people, young people who understand everything. Something as simple as a payment gateway can be a challenge. You know, till now, telemedicine has been little bit of a free service where commercials were never considered. Now it has become a vehicle for payment of fees and delivery of services, which goes beyond the original model in very many establishments. So till you understand all these things, in my hospital, we created a team of 4-5 people who would give an appointment, create a clinic room consultation, then call up the people and have a chat with them. Whether you're comfortable, is the linking working, have you understood, are there any hiccups when you log in? Because when you really get into the experience, half the time logging in will be the bigger challenge which you will face. So we were smart enough, because we have been involved in telemedicine for the last 20-25 years. We know the pitfalls. So pitfalls is not always technology. Pitfalls also is the engagement of a new patient who is away from technology. These are some of the challenges which we face. Now your second question, work from home. Work from home is a great concept. It is going to work to a large extent, and it is going to stay, especially with the concept of social distancing in offices. You really can't have two chairs next to each other. So we, till now, we have 50% of staff not working from in-office scenario. They are working in outside office scenarios, and we are altering and alternating their presence in the hospital. I think that were the questions you asked, doctor. Did I miss out on anything?
Sure, sir. So, in the future, I just wanted a quick one-liner or two lines. In the future, how do you think hospitals will enable such environments, given the threat of cybersecurity and many hospitals facing those sort of things?
Yeah, we had an experience with cybersecurity as well. Working from home will be a challenge once it comes to cybersecurity, definitely. Unless until you have proper institutionalized firewalls and other concerns, you will be compromised. That is one bigger threat to working from home. The other important thing which people are overlooking as a threat, and it will compromise, is that they consider WhatsApp as telemedicine. Well, the greatest declaration for healthcare was that they gave legal substance and legal support to telemedicine, which was missing, as Dr. Saib Ganapathy also told us, that now telemedicine is fully legal and there are no question marks with regard to telemedicine consults or second opinions. But what they have to understand, that the compromise on the compliance and telemedicine being seen largely as a video conferencing on WhatsApp or some other of these video conferencing tools will not be enough for the future. You will need to have the compliant tools. You need to have all security things in place, and also the privacy. Now, these things in India are not so prevalent, but in healthcare, it will be of utmost importance. So any hospital, any institution which does not keep in consideration the privacy issues will eventually get into trouble. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So now moving on to Dr. Satish Rath, and I think this is a topic that is very close to his heart, where he speaks very passionately on digital health and why he feels that every organization, not just a hospital, needs to have a distinct digital footprint. So, sir, are we moving with hospitals which will now consider a strategic business unit for digital health specifically, and what would be the core elements of such SBUs?
Yeah, so thanks Nitiraj and thanks Healthcare Radius for having me. And that's a very important question which all the hospital managements are actually struggling with. So I would say yes and a no, to your question. Yes, because digital transformation or making the hospital as digital is the only way going forward. This is no luxury, or this is no nice to have thing. And also we need to understand, taking a step back, why the situation, what we are in. So somewhere healthcare system have been confused as hospitals. But what we are taught in medicine all over the world is hospital is just at the tertiary care, at the late stage. But the primary care, secondary care are actually the most important part of a healthcare system, and which has been completely ignored because the business was not there. Maybe the cost of care of sick care was always higher compared to cost of care for primary care and secondary care. So hospitals have been confused. Even hospital systems have confused themselves as providing healthcare as a hospital only. But our patients' care is the healthcare system, and primary care and secondary care and follow-up care, as Dr. Ganapathy was saying, are the bulk of our patient population. Thanks to COVID, I think people have realized now the elective cases are not coming, the insurance cases are not coming. You cannot operate a normal thing in the hospital. Even people don't opt to come to the hospital. So now people are reacting to the situation. But if you consider, let's say, healthcare research-wise, healthcare system design-wise, or healthcare economics-wise, always the patients who were 90% of the population were always outside the hospital. But we always ignored them because there was not a business case for it. So if the hospitals have to start towards digital healthcare transformation, they need to first understand this reality is they don't have to limit themselves only inside the premises of the hospital. A healthcare starts where the patient is there, and the healthcare starts when the patient is not sick. He is looking for wellness, he's looking for preventive steps, he's looking for vaccinations, he's looking for an aftercare, he's looking for a post-discharge consultation, he's looking for a re-opinion, he's looking for a screening, and all these things can be very well done scientifically outside the hospital premises. But because we were not aware about this, so we have been thinking our opportunity is only when a patient actually walks inside the hospital premises, and which this myth now, is busted, and people are looking for, patients who are outside hospitals. And for hospitals, as the new normal is going to be, you might be achieving 70 to 80% of your revenue as you were, doing year on year. So for traditional hospital to survive, there is no other way but to look for new business streams which are coming from patients who are outside the hospital. So for which actually, digital transformation is very, very important. If you see the market, what has happened in digital healthcare investment, especially, globally, we have seen, almost 30 to 40% of surge. More than $200 billion has been invested into the healthcare startups. And where the startups are coming from, interestingly, they are not coming from the healthcare IT or the healthcare ERP systems, what we call as HIS or EMR. So they are actually coming from new technologies and the digital, let's say, healthcare startup. So we need to understand is if a hospital wishes to go for the digital transformation journey, they have to consider that this is not the typical work of a healthcare IT team which manages HIS or maybe which manages ERP systems or the SAP systems. You have to look for a really true nature of digital healthcare. In digital healthcare, the important part is digital, and IT is not digital. IT is the upgraded, maybe version of software implementation, we can say, in today's world. And digital, we are talking about cognitive psychology, behavioral economics, engaging people in a continuous way, following the patient journey, using the best of AI, deep learning, cognitive models. So let's say leveraging IoT, using blockchain as a, distributed ledger. So that part of digital, our healthcare typical traditional IT staff cannot actually deliver. So then I think, your question to come that, should the hospital be really investing deeply into these deep technologies? Maybe, if you see the staff of all the big, hospital enterprises, the IT staff is actually quite minimal. Even if the dream to have actually a big digital transformation, you cannot actually hire this digital workforce, because you need to have a management which understands which kind of workforce has to be hired. So the best model I see going forward is the open innovation model, where you need to have a digital person who can guide the IT staff or the CIO of the hospital to say what kind of technologies can be integrated on top of existing system. So that is one model. And most of your innovations are going to come from the startup by plugging them in. So you create a data layer or a data model where each patient's de-identified data is available, and be it mental health, be it chronic care, be it home health care, be it diagnostics, be it teleradiology, be it aftercare, all these things can be plugged in a radial manner. So a very good example is, what we are also working with Government of India is like UPI. Once you have the UPI framework, you had the direct benefit transfer, you had the, let's say, passport services or phone services or loan services, any of, financial transaction related services, but they are all based on a typical interoperable layer called UPI. Same way, if we can have a health stack where work is already started, and that's the interoperable layer, then hospitals can actually work with multiple startups in the ecosystem and provide these out of hospital services. To have this, the team needs to be knowing about digital architecture, the newer architectures of digital science, also newer architecture of healthcare economics, which is very, very important, because I think both the doctors earlier to me said that how patients are going to, let's say, engage into the services. Your earlier question is also, why did we see a surge and again a dip? Because our systems are not designed to engage a person. If you see engagement of Amazon, engagement of, let's say, Netflix, which is a very good example, there is a behavioral psychology pattern which engages the customer throughout their journey. So when we talk about telemedicine, the available applications are mostly tele or the conference part, but very less on the medicine part. A typical virtual encounter, when we think of, there is a responsibility of the patient and there is a responsibility of a doctor. As a doctor, as we see a patient, we collect history from the patient, and that's the responsibility of the, let's say, patient. Current telemedicine encounters doesn't actually help the patient to collect his history in a logical manner. And when it comes to doctor, as a doctor, I have to collect a lot of signs. I have to examine physically, and now I don't have that luxury to examine the patient, to collect the signs. And without the signs, and history plus signs are actually going to be my diagnosis. So I need to have my IoT devices where I can virtually collect my signs. So the nice or a real telemedicine encounter to have, we need to have automation for the patient responsibility, which is collecting their history without asking them a question, where we are working with, let's say, the chatbots and the AI and the NLP sector. When it comes to the, let's say, the sign collection, we are working with many of the medical devices where even a nurse might not be there at the patient end. The patient has to operate these devices, and the devices are being built for the telemedicine ecosystem now. So you are collecting the history automatically, you are collecting the signs automatically. And the beauty of digital is then you can suggest the doctor what can be the possible differential diagnosis for this patient with a good amount of specificity and sensitivity. When you are able to automate many of these things without compromising the quality and keeping the engagement on, that's what we call as a normal WhatsApp call to a telemedicine solution. So these are the parts where you need to understand technology in the deep level, you need to understand healthcare in the deep level, you need to understand behavioral economics or engagement in a deep level. You need to also understand what Dr. Bhardwaj also saying is telemedicine is seen as a free service. Maybe people might not be ready to pay higher for telemedicine, but they might be ready to pay higher for a physical consultation. So this behavior change is going to happen, but not going to happen actually overnight. So maybe hospitals which were tuned to charging, let's say, X amount of rupees, maybe 1,000 rupees for a consultation, might have to, let's say, agree for 100 rupees to 200 rupees to 300 rupees kind of a consultation, because you are now looking for a high volume, low margin kind of a business. But the good part of digital is it need not be limited to your only patients. You can offer the service to entire of your region. You can offer your service to the entire India as a population. If you are actually having a good solution, you are not limited to this business model. So having a strategic unit as digital group inside the hospital as a small team is very, very important. But I won't advise the hospitals to build a large digital team. Rather, they should leverage on the startups, but they need to be advised by a small digital team who understands this entire technology stack. Maybe I will say
Agree with
that
you.
would be the way.
Thank you so much. Dipopam, since you've been into consulting and you interact with multiple health systems and medical device providers, a lot of them. So what is the major change that you've seen in care delivery and consumption patterns these past 2 months? And what are those one or two trends that you think will in the future?
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Gandhi, and thanks to ITP for organizing this seminar, and also to my colleagues. So, as everybody is mentioning, yes, healthcare has today found itself tested by this pandemic. It is truly being tested right now, the healthcare delivery system. The frontline workers are fighting heroically, true, but once as we leave behind the old and moving forward, this new normal or the next normal will look nothing like the old normal. The old normal with the existing, the kind of healthcare delivery system what we have seen, it has got choked, right? It cannot pace or scale to track or trace or contain this the people with this kind of the suspected infections. So traditionally, what we have seen is that the healthcare system was more like a brick and mortar. As my esteemed colleagues have been saying that that telemedicine kind of a free additional kind of a thing. It was more like brick and mortar, and the entire healthcare delivery model was based on face-to-face. The clinical workflows, the economic incentives were all based on the fact that people were congregating in the emergency room or the waiting room. But now that cannot happen with this COVID and this kind of epidemic kind of a situation, where you cannot have a large number of people getting into a single place for evaluation. The vulnerable people with multiple chronic infection, they're having a difficulty right now, between choosing whether to go to the hospital to risk infection or delay the treatment. So there is a need, as Dr. Gandhi, you mentioned that everywhere we are seeing, and what we're hearing from others also, that there's a need to transform the healthcare and scale up the delivery system so that it embraces the path of the digital technologies. So the one thing is that previously, yes, there was telemedicine, there was an ad hoc and less kind of a use of video conferencing, some digital solutions. Now there is a more embracing of this one. And digital technology and telemedicine has existed for decades. For last 20 years it was there, but there was poor penetration because of the lack of regulatory backup, and the tech solutions did not have that kind of the security and the privacy, and proper payment structure was not there. There was also suspicion of the patients on the quality of the care. So it was not progressing. But right now, with the new telemedicine guidelines that have come up, which has given the legality for this one, and also with the new technologies that have come up, now this embracing of this technology is one of the key trends we are seeing. There was an earlier report from KPMG where 38% of the health systems did not have any kind of a digital plan, and 94% of them pointed out to data protection, privacy regulation, kind of these things. But now with the expanded regulatory and better reimbursement model and evaluation of the clinical care, we will see this telemedicine, teleconsultation more having a prevalence. That's number one. Second is home care or hospital at home, that kind of a care for infected patients who are otherwise stable, or discharging the patients, early discharge of patients, because you don't want them to stay and use the hospital infrastructure. You discharge the patients, early discharge, who are admitted if you think that they're okay. So this second, remote care or the hospital at home care. The third is to oversee persons, means at a scale, for persons who are under investigation in home quarantine. Physicians and the health system now need to, at a larger scale, oversee a large set of populations using kind of technology, remote monitoring kind of the things, using IoT to be able to monitor a large set of population. It is not possible for them to come to the kind of the hospital kind of a setting. The fourth trend which I'm seeing is a digitally integrated patient journey. Patients are now reducing the skepticism, and there is a shorter adoption curve to use the EMR record, then base analytics on top of this one, so that it can use AI, machine learning, deep learning to get a more personalized treatment care for the patient. So that kind of a individualized or personal patient journey is another thing that is emerging. From the government and the business side, as far as for the government part, that they are promoting interoperability, and so data interoperability is getting a lot of priority. And as you know that the National Digital Health Mission blueprint has come out, and government is trying to get that national digital health stack actually implemented, which will form like a health exchange, so that hospitals, payers, providers, patients, pharmacy will be able to exchange data and information, so that the person's electronic medical records are there, which can be transferred. So that data interoperability is one thing, and then the standardization of currently fragmented medical system, and accepting of the remote monitoring techniques. Many of the things that my esteemed colleagues are saying are, these are the kind of the trends that are being there. Government is increasingly accepting this one, and as Dr. Ganapathy mentioned, that earlier telemedicine, the doctors were afraid, is that the right thing? Patients were worried that if there is anything wrong, will I be able to get the legal support? But that legalization of telemedicine has been done, and so the country is now getting accepted to the new reality, the new ways of working, and accepting the new technologies. So these are some of the trends that Dr. Gandhi I see right now happening both in the public and the private space.
Sure. Thank you so much, Devagam. Thank you so much. And that was really insightful. Just to summarize what we've discussed till now, Dr. Ganapathy, with doctors being advocates for telemedicine and how we should review cases. And then Dr. Soumitra, elaborated a bit further on that, citing two major things, that is training of doctors as well as raising the awareness in patients and engagement with the elderly. With Dr. Satish, I think we explored another paradigm altogether, where we are talking about hospitals learning to get in some startups so that solutions can be designed which are customized for the hospital as well as patients. And the trends that you mentioned, Debopam, they're pretty interesting, where we're talking about hospital at home, remote health, and digitally integrated patient journey. Now, we have a few questions also from the audience, and while we continue with our conversation, I'll mix the question with some of our own thoughts, so that the speakers can elaborate a bit on that. Dr. Ganpati, this one is for you, where someone's asked that the doctors themselves are problems of telemedicine, and somehow, I might say that's a part of the problem, but that's also a part of the training of doctors, because we are not trained to prescribe on mobile phones or tablets. Now, how do we increase the acceptance? And my answer to that would be through better technology. But given your experience of more than 3 decades into telemedicine, I would like to understand from you if you think there are any other reasons.
Thank you. I have never been a diplomat in my life. I call a spade a spade. The biggest incentive, we are all hypocrites. We don't like to talk about money. We think philanthropy, a doctor means you expect everything to be free. It is philanthropy, philanthropy, philanthropy all the way. But it's a fact of life that everybody looks at ROI. When I was an active neurosurgical practice, I had not heard of this word ROI, but now I know what is ROI. So during all my last 20 years, I've been talking of Wi-Fi, WiMAX as methods of connectivity. But one term which I like to use is YFM, WIIFM. What is in it for me? This is the question which needs to be answered. What is in it for me, for the CEO of the hospital, for the CFO of the hospital, for the digital person, for the person software, hardware, application, everybody, every member of the ecosystem, what is in it for me? Unless there is a business model with 1,300 million people requiring maybe about 5,000 million consultations every day, we have never progressed because there is no business model. I think the last 2 years, digital payment, somebody spoke about payment gateway, etc. Now that this has been integrated and is being integrated, sir, to me, this is the biggest incentive. Incentivization is money, money, money at the end of the day. After all, you expect to be compensated for the effort and time you put in. Nobody grudges some free teleconsultations, etc. So I think now the time is ripe, with regulations being passed, with digital money becoming, everybody becoming familiar with digital money. I think doctors will start understanding that for their own livelihood, they have to keep up with the Jones. You cannot be, you have to be future ready. Whether you like it or not, the medical community is slowly accepting the fact that if they are to stay in business, if they have to earn even a normal livelihood and a normal income, they have to do virtual care. Training, I think, is absolutely essential. It's not as complicated as it sounds. Maybe 20 hours, 50 hours is all that is required maximum. The Medical Council of India has just notified, that part of the March 25th notification is within 3 years we need to complete a course which is approved by the Medical Council of India. Several organizations, including Telemedicine Society of India, have already started an online course. I think about 4,000 doctors have completed that. A few private organizations have already embarked on very intensive courses. I think online education, including various modules, self-learning, followed by a 1 hour interaction, FAQs are answered. All this have started, and I am absolutely sure in the next 6 months, you will have a number of courses to choose from. And my own humble request is, you can be self-taught like me. Nobody taught me telemedicine. People of my generation, we all learned it the hard way. We made mistakes, but we would like to share the mistakes we made. We don't want the next generation to repeat the hundreds of mistakes which we all made. And I would very strongly urge and advocate everybody to do these courses. You choose what course you like, what it is. It will definitely make a difference. You don't have to start off where we started. You can start in 2021. Answer to your question is an online few hours. That's all that we are asking. Just spend about 6 hours, 8 hours. That's all that is required. You'll also be formally certified. And I think this is what is going to happen.
Can I add on that, doctor?
Please, please.
Yes, please.
What Dr. Ganapati said, and that's very close to my heart, was the commercial aspect of telemedicine. I have been failing for last 20 years in telemedicine because all it has happened is because of my initiative, right? We need to have a sustainable model. Till you don't have sustainability, self-sustainability, it will not work. Like for example, telemedicine consultation is a longer consultation than normal. Number one. Number two, it is bad experience or potentially a more difficult experience because it's not a free-flowing experience between for the doctor and for the patient. Fine. Now we have to take care of this experience as well, and we have to take care of the commercials as well. We had Dr. Rath mentioning 1,000 rupees consultation. If that is one aspect, because when I started telemedicine with Tata's before I put up my ICUs, I told them very clearly that if you're going to try to make it for free, I don't think it will be sustainable. So it has to be commercially viable. The hospitals have to understand that if you do remote care without remote diagnostics and delivery of medicine, the pharmacy business of yours is compromised and even investigation. So you have to do consultation, you have to have home collection of blood, and you have to have home delivery of medicine. Potentially, I'm talking about tertiary level, 10-kilometer radius, these things. If you don't work it all within the thing, it is not going to work out. And I myself always advocated, unless until you have a model where it's a primary health care where it can be done for free, but all tertiary care, you should charge actually more than your OPD charges, because you do two extra things to the patient. One is you save his time, which is hell of a lot of time he saves, commuting to and fro and waiting for the doctor. And secondly, second point was it skipped my mind. So he saves time, he saves the discomfort, and also he saves money on transport. So if you will not work it all together in your model, it will not be a successful model. Third and foremost, what Dr. Satish was saying, the psychology. The psychology of the patient and the psychology of the doctors have to be considered to model what kind of telemedicine you are offering. Are you offering an intensive care connect, like an ICU level? Are you looking at a commercials of a follow-up kind of work, or you are looking at a primary healthcare work? The commercials have to come top down and not from the telemedicine or the IT department. Till all these things are factored into the budget and the target of the hospital, we don't, or we may not see the exponential growth which the telemedicine deserves today. Thank you.
Sure,
Dr.
sir.
Gandhi,
So,
if I can add just one point, which I think is very, very relevant, is a good news that the Insurance Development Regulatory Authority of India recently has confirmed that insurance companies can reimburse teleconsultations. 2-3 insurance companies have already started. This can make a phenomenal difference if we are to go by United States experience. In United States, it increased by 8 times in just over 9 months. In the US, of course, it's a very complex billing system, but nevertheless, Medicaid, Medicare, United Health, etc., all the big insurance companies reimburse teleconsultations. And this single thing, if it is implemented in India, will be a win-win situation for everybody, because preventive healthcare will be promoted. Insurance companies will have to reimburse less amount on doing open heart surgeries. In fact, I told Dr. Pratap Reddy 15 years ago, I told him, sir, if I am really to succeed and if telemedicine really succeeds, you'll have to close down many Apollo hospitals because half the patients need not come here at all. And he jokingly told me, India is a very big country, don't worry, I will survive and you will also survive.
that was interesting. So now a question for Dr. Soumitra, Debapam, and Dr. Satish. All three of you, I think can take a stab at these two questions. They come from very genuine concern. First is, are we getting the target population wrong? Because one of the members from our audience says that we are talking about tertiary care hospitals and tier 1 cities, but the actual load is in tier 2 cities and the government hospitals and nursing homes out there. So are we really focusing on that target population and looking at them as an incremental target audience for us and consumers of these healthcare services? That's first. Second is, are we, this comes probably from a very layman concern, but very genuine one, is a lot of jargon is prevalent in when we say AI, NLP, ML, all of these things. And people think that telemedicine and e-health and digital health become very complicated. But in simple layman terms, is it so difficult to bring healthcare to somebody's doorstep?
Okay, I think a very good question.
Sure.
If you really see, Sir mentioned that he does 8,000 consults a day. I think that's a fantastic number for one organization or one set of team to do 8,000 consults per day. So what does a tertiary care hospital target, and what do pure telemedicine companies target or teleconsultation companies target are two different phenomena. For us, as I just drove 2 days back, 500 kilometers up and down. It took me around 15 hours. And wherever I went, whether it was Bardwan, whether it was Durgapur, or whether it was Asansol, everybody was asking for telemedicine. So the target for tertiary care is actually whole of India, for sure. And it is only limited by the fact where till what time is you are recognized and to what distance the patient is going to travel in order he needs to have a physical consultation. This is a psychological point. So I see myself till Asansol, that's around 300 kilometers or 260 kilometers. To that point, teleconsultation works for my hospital. But at the same time, we have teleconsultation facilities here, even from Apollo Chennai. But that is happening because of the follow-up problems of patients who are coming back for treatment. So the target is hospital based, the number of patients you have of yours in the city, and the third is the acquisition of new patients that has a little bit of a geographical concern. What is the distance till what distance you are recognized as a dependable hospital name brand. That is number one. Number two, the biggest problem with telehealth and mHealth is the compatibility issue and the platforms. Whatever you get to see as a working sample, it doesn't work when you take it home to work along with your phone. This is a challenge I have seen with all Bluetooth devices, with blood pressure, with weighing machines, with glucometers, and a lot of apps which help your in at least tabulating your healthcare data. So if you keep all the jargon away, it is the lack of a standardized software Government of India can give for free. If a Government of India gives us a stable, standardized software which everybody can use on a subscription basis, I can tell you it will go 1,000 times bigger than what it is in 9 months, as Sir was saying. One platform which is secure, government approved, and subscription based. If the Government of India does this, that's enough. I think everything is going to change that day. That is something very important. Second, the challenge which I don't think will get solved easily is the various platforms, various equipment available, and their compatibility with various devices. For that, I'm not the right person to answer, but I have struggled with many, and I'm just a recipient on the receiving end.
No problem, sir. So I think Dr.
This is,
Satish,
I would
please.
say, yeah, I mean, this is a very, very important question. So I think, for the question, are the hospitals getting the target patients wrong? I would say yes. Because, as I told you earlier, hospitals or doctors have been thinking that, healthcare is hospital-based care. So we have to come out of that mindset. We can actually take a step back and really understand how healthcare works. So healthcare is not hospital-centric system. So then I think, we will be not talking about telecare, remote care, hospital at home. Wherever there is a patient, he has got a need, we need to provide, care. Because our technology was not there, so we had to depend on a hospital-centric system. Now we can do those things on a digital-based system. So that is part one. 80% of all the population health, I mean, whatever people are actually suffering, can be actually solved without, let's say, coming to the hospital. That falls in the primary and the secondary care level. What the hospitals or the doctors should be really looking for is, how do I have a business model for it? And there are business models which are working for it. Now, the third part is all this jargon regarding AI, NLP, deep learning, all these things are for the digital team or the IT team to figure it out. This is not for the patient. The patient should expect, I should get a care at a affordable, accessible, in a good experience wherever I'm expecting. And if my hospital or doctor is able to provide that, he should be good with that. Finally, we have a good definition from HIMSS about digital healthcare, because this question has been confused that what is telemedicine, what is teleconsult, what is e-health, what is mHealth. So finally, there is a good definition. I think, everyone who has not gone through the HIMSS definition of digital health should ideally go for that, which talks about wellness, preventive care, at a good experience, having interoperability and everything. So I think that's a comprehensive, definition of digital health. But the most important part is, why are we missing the target population? So is a 1mg is working or not? Is a MD Life is working or not? Whether a PharmEasy is working or not? So the digital healthcare platforms like e-pharmacy, e-diagnostics, they are doing wonderfully good, and they are actually targeting the population in a very, very right way. If I just have to look for, traditional healthcare is always specialty focused. So let's say Dr. Ganapathy is a neurosurgeon, I'm a pediatrician. Let's say Dr. Bharadwaj might have, specialist in some, thing. But when it comes to telemedicine, there is a strange change happens that, it's a video conferencing between a doctor and a patient. So for digital healthcare to really work, it has to be specialized focused. I will give you just one example. At Aster, we launched a mental health service called Serenity. So we gave this mental health service to all our Aster staff because they were going through COVID, as well as all the patients, who are actually accessing this mental health service, through our website. Now, this is a B2C platform. This is a great telehealth platform, and people are really getting engaged into it, and they're getting benefited out of it. If you go for a typical consultation, it might cost you a bomb. But if you go through a digital telepsychiatry consultation, it is 24/7. It is available anytime and everywhere. It is clinically certified, and there is a business model which is working on it. So it is becoming a independent vertical for us. Definitely, hospitals are targeting it wrong. So they should be looking for the target population, be it mental care, be it gynec care, be it orthopedics care, be it post-surgical rehabilitation, be it chronic care, be it elderly care, be it pediatric care. It has to be defined like that. Then I think they are going to succeed. They also need to learn from the MD Life or the 1mgs or the PharmEasys and the teleradiology firm, which has been doing very good. They are not restricting themselves to regions or their own hospital population. And third is, again and again and again, I say, is making it easier to experience and making the business model, the onus lies with the digital health firm. If it is staying within the hospital, then with the management. If it is staying with the startup, then with the startup founders. Now, the next leaders, if they have to survive in this onsurge of, let's say, COVID or the transformation, whatever we are going. So maybe for a Dr. Ganapathy, he has to understand digital. There is no, let's say, running away from it. For a Dr. Bharadwaj, he has to understand what is digital. Or if there is a digital transformation officer or a CIO or a CTO, they have to understand medicine also. So the future leaders have to be C+D, I call it. So they have to be clinically trained and they have to be digitally trained. So it is very difficult for a digital person to understand medicine, but it is very easy actually for a clinical person to understand the fundamentals of digital. So I hope, I think, in this way, hospitals can actually look for the bigger market.
Sir. Debopam, I mean, I'd
I
like
have
to
just 2 points. I think everybody made some wonderful comments to add. I will take what Dr. Bhardwaj was telling, that from the government, because I do a lot of work with public healthcare and with government, that to make it economic viable, software is one option, but I think there are a lot of IT systems. But if this teleconsultation to reach out to a larger population, to the say entire India, to reach out, you see if you look at the Ayushman Bharat scheme, where patients have to come to the hospital to get that free cashless delivery which the government of India has done. If this teleconsultation is also made part of it, so that this kind of a cashless delivery can be done, okay, then I think it will go a lot of in a lot of way to promote teleconsultation and telemedicine. Okay, so that's one thing that I would say, that that if the government through its its digital health strategy is able to adopt, that will be something which because the government is promoting, as you saw, that it has made telemedicine legalized. It has been able to give doctors various channels through which they can do the consultation. It has given a legal framework also for the patients, number one. And the second point is that I think the myth has to be busted out that AI, ML, everything is telemedicine, teleconsultation. End of the day, it is a human interaction between the doctor and the patient through a medium where they may be far off, but as we are talking, we are hardly seeing the difference. We are talking and we are clearly exchanging our thoughts and opinions. AI, ML are personalized medical clinical pathways that we design for the patient, that the patient did not. It is for them the media, there should be a secured 256-bit encrypted, so that the patient records are there and they can be able to talk to each other, the patient and the doctor.
Thank you so much, Debopam. Thank you so much. I think we are running out of time, I've been informed. So
So
just
just to, I mean, final sentence to add on to Debopam's, let's say, comment is, yesterday Apple also launched 2 features to watch. So if somebody is washing, it can detect it automatically, and it can detect sleep also automatically. Now it is using a lot of AI algorithm to do this, but Apple doesn't have to communicate that I'm using AI to detect your sleep
Correct.
or your washing of your hand. Same for doctors, we don't have to say that we are using AI to detect your diagnosis. That is to be done in the background. It is the earlier diagnosis at a good experience, at a good cost, for a good outcome. That is what the commitment a doctor has for a patient, and that should be, if AI is meeting that need, and obviously AI has to be used for that, that should be in the background, not in the foreground.
definitely. Thank you so much. I think it was a wonderful panel discussion and we got some good questions. My request to the audience is, I think you can, a few of these pics and videos would also be available, and you can connect with us over LinkedIn or through Healthcare Radius. Please feel free to do that. And especially Professor Ganapathy, I think he's been a stalwart in the field of telemedicine. So special thanks to you, sir. I think it's been wonderful to hear from you over the years and even today. Thank you, Dr. Soumitra. Thank you, Dr. Satish, as always. And thank you, Debopam. I think it was a wonderful conversation. Yes, sir. Please. Last word.
Based on my white hair, because of my white hair, can I have the last word? I would just
Sure,
like
sir.
to emphasize, obviously I love technology, otherwise I wouldn't be here. But I would want to emphasize again and again and again that technology is a means to an end and not an end by itself. Technology is an enabler. The more technology I use, the more I can, I should, and I will empathize and sympathize with the patient, tender, loving care. At the end of the day, I am a clinician, I'm a doctor. I would like to wipe the tears of a patient. I can do this virtually. I can do this on a smartphone. I can use most sophisticated AI or robots, chatbot, you name it. But the final take-home message would be, a doctor should continue to be a doctor and not be a faceless, senseless, heartless robot.
Thank you so much, sir. That was a very passionate ending. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
everybody.
Dr.
Everyone.
Gandhi. I think you have done a wonderful moderation for today, and we thank each one of the participants and panelists putting all the questions, putting all the queries in the right perspective, And I hope audience would have enjoyed today's session. And there are so many questions still coming, even I'm getting on my WhatsApp as well. But due to the time constraint, we don't have more, we can take the questions now. Thank you once again, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the insightful discussion today. So there are a lot of take-home messages and there are a lot of questions coming in. Probably we'll pass on the question later on. Thank you so much for giving your precious time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.